What is your job as a producer?
My job as a producer is to leave the world touched, moved, and inspired. And how that works is that it can be creatively, it can be responsibly in terms of working with a studio or a financier and making sure the creative and the business side gel well. There's constant fires happening before production, in development, in pre-production, production, and post-production. So it's managing those fires, managing expectations, and ultimately, in the beginning, if I'm coming earlier on, is setting the tone for the dynamics of the project, the team, and having a level of clarity. So everyone knows what they're responsible for, what I'm responsible for. And in a sense, it's a marriage when I start on a project because I'm going to be glued to this project for the rest of my life. And I want to make sure that I work with people that like me and I like them, and to have a process where we can all be successful together. The goal is to do that creatively and to do that financially so we can keep making movies, and it's a win for everyone. As a producer, I have to finish a project on time, on budget, and take care of my director. Make sure that he or she feels that they have the proper support, that they feel confident in their job. Sometimes to be a support system in terms of emotional, whatever therapy that is, that's very important, protecting the creative, as well as the talent as well, making sure that they feel good, they know what they need to do, they don't need to worry about anything outside of their performances and their rehearsals. And then the same thing I would say for whoever is backing the movie, whether it's an investor or it's a production company or it's a grant or a program, all of the same things. It's just having a strong line of communication, being detailed, making sure they know that I'm competent and that the team is competent as well.
And has that role, because what I'm hearing from you is that you have a very clear sort of identity as a producer. Was it always that clear for you? Or did each one sharpen you and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that again, or this is who I am in this role?
What I noticed was that there were projects where things went wrong, where I made bad decisions, or other individuals made bad decisions. And going to Q&As for films at festivals or films that are coming out, learning what the filmmakers did, what went wrong, what was right, and how the success came together has helped me figure that out, as well as having a pool of other filmmakers that I trust and like, and I could bounce ideas off of, and hearing their frustrations, where they've gone wrong, their failure, as well as their wins, or when I've had problems along the way, and asking them, what do you think I should do, or how would you handle this? And one of the things I've noticed is that, I would say more towards the last few years, is that it starts at the top. So if you are organized, engaged, and kind, and you set that tone of how you want the production to run, not necessarily it'll be spot on every time, but if you bring in good and kind and hardworking people, it makes the job a little bit easier, and everyone feels that they can communicate and share if there's an issue or problem in their department, or if there's even something outside of the production that's affecting their job. which is important. At the end of the day, we're all humans. And sometimes I feel that productions or people in production forget that. And I don't want to have that energy or reputation to not be mindful of my crew, because without the crew, you have no project. And in terms of the mandate that I've developed in terms of getting behind women and BIPOC and queer, I identify as BIPOC. You know, I'm Haitian American, and there's not a lot of Haitian producers that I know, maybe a handful. And even in the space of people of color, there's not that many. So what I noticed is, as I became a producer, I wanted to support projects around people of color, written by people of color or made by people of color. So that was, I wouldn't say natural, that only made sense. And what I'd noticed in my career as well is that how the challenges that I had, my filmmaker friends that happen to be women or young women were having the same challenges. And I found some success with some women-driven projects. And at that point, I said, you know what? I'm gonna make BIPOC stories, get behind BIPOC stories, and female-led stories. And then what occurred was that a lot of my queer friends and colleagues, I noticed that they had a lot of challenges as well. And I wanted to build that into what I make as well. So that's how I kind of found many of the stories that I want to get behind, or the people I want to get behind. It happened homeopathically or organically. It wasn't necessarily planned. It just kind of fell into place that way.
And sorry, can you define BIPOC for me, please?
So BIPOC meaning Black, indigenous, people of color. So it could be someone that is West Indian or Caribbean or Cuban, Afro-American, Puerto Rican, Asian, Indian, and I guess anything that's just white for the most part.
And in terms of queer stories, does it always have to be a romance, or it can just be anything about the queer experience in terms of dealing with family, dealing with things in the workplace?
It's fairly open across the board, but what I would say is that if you notice, or the general public notices, a lot of the queer stories are usually about relationship for the most part, or some type of trauma or tragedy. Because even though these stories have been told, they haven't been told enough, kind of like how you always see slave stories being told. You know, it's kind of a reminder, and not necessarily being relevant, but letting people know. So it's an important issue. So most of the queer stories that I've come across deal with those type of problems. They're not just a comedy and we're just happy and just the way it works. I mean, that's realism. So it makes sense, at least for me.
What are the most important skills you have as a producer?
My most important skills would be communication. The communication is the most important, I would say, thing in any relationship, whether it's outside or in, production. And I feel that when I can communicate efficiently with what I'm looking to do or what I can bring to the table, I can manage expectations, and then vice versa. When I'm speaking with a filmmaker or a team or production company, understanding what their process is. I don't want to assume, because then you can miss expectations or let people down. And there's a level of clarity, and it also helps bond with whoever you may be working with. And it also prevents myself from getting on projects that I wouldn't want to be on, or working with people I don't want to work with, because the reality of it is that if they don't communicate at the level that I communicate, it's probably going to be dysfunctional and it's not going to work. I'm going to frustrate them. They're going to frustrate me. And I feel that there's so many projects where I've heard horror stories where things have gone wrong because of bad communication. So that's something that I excel at. If that person or group is not communicating well, I find a way to communicate with them where it's not threatening or just letting them know it's okay. It's a safe place, or we can have a conversation about it. I'm open and willing to hear what the group or company has to share. And that I ask for the same in return. I think it's the most important thing across the board in this business is just clear communication. Outside of the communication, I would say is networking. I've read some great articles, books, stories, and the networking has really opened up opportunities and doors because half the time or half the battle is just showing up. And there's just been so many times in my life, whether in my film life or just life period, just going somewhere just opens up the opportunities. You never know. And it's definitely helped my brand. So people and groups or individuals or companies in the business can be aware. It's kind of like a self-promotion, just getting my name out there and what I work on, what I'm looking to work on, and hearing the same from other filmmakers and individuals, what are their goals, and then seeing if there's a match or a way to work. So yes, networking is probably my second, I'd say, tool in the toolbox. And then probably my third is just attention to detail, just really understanding things, whether it's body language. 80% of communication is body language. Watching a room, that kind of blends into networking. When I go into a room, whatever it is, whether it's in production or not, and I don't know anybody and there's 1,000 people in the room, I'm just watching it and getting a feel for it, getting the energy, the tone. And if I really struggle to figure it out, I'll go to whoever's running the event or whoever's in charge, and I'll ask questions and I'll be very transparent. I'm new to this event. I don't know anyone here. I would like to look for this type of person, or maybe I have a list of names. Do you know what they look like? Or have they checked in? Can you help me? And the reality is that most people would want to help when you come to them and ask them in a nice way. Please and thank you are the two forgotten languages in the English language. So I always make it a point to say please, thank you, because they don't have to do it. And then in terms of paying attention to detail, it's if there's someone that I really want to work with or get to know, I'll do as much research as possible on them and maybe even learn a little bit about their personal life, where they are, family or not family, how they got into the business, what keeps them going per se, finding that common denominator to break the ice, because that's always the thing. This is the icebreaker. Once I can figure out what that thing is, whether it's they're a diabetic too, we can, they put their guards down and it's like it's another human being, or maybe they're West Indian, they're from one of the countries down there. And we can talk about our experiences being from the West Indies or the Caribbean. It can be anything, but I look for something that's common. I'm a proud and happy BlackBerry user. It is one of my great icebreakers because people that have had BlackBerries in the past, they always reminisce about, oh my God, I remember, and you could see them kind of drift off into their head, and then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you still have it. And we talk about that, and then we go into something else. But that's always been helpful, just the detail to things. And I want to say the average person probably doesn't step back and pay attention to the detail. So when I do, it's acknowledged, and it's appreciated. Uh, and that's been very helpful in the process across the board. And probably the last thing I'd say is, I've heard this a couple of times, read it many times, is, the creator, God, whoever, whatever you want to call it, gave you 2 ears and a mouth for a reason. So a lot of times when I meet someone or meet people, I'll just listen because I can learn a lot from them about where they are in their life, where they're looking to do, what excites them, what's important. It's not about what's important to me, it's what's important to them. And is there a way I can help or service that? And then it could be a match. And I can also learn that maybe this is not the right person because not everyone is right for me and I'm not right for every person as well. So the listening goes so far. Just being aware, paying attention, using my 5 senses has helped a lot.
You have a strong sixth sense too?
Yes, I am very spiritual. I love meditating. It took me a while to get to the point where the level of meditation I do now, because I meditate for the most part every day. And it could be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or half an hour. And I'm in groups of meditation groups. So I trust my intuition. I trust myself. And I want to say majority of the time your intuition is right. So I'm just comfortable with myself and sense of being and understanding, and read many books around spirituality. I dabbled with Buddhism a while back. I looked at other religions. But at the end of the day, I feel that we're all the same. That's one of the things I realized traveling to different cities around the country or outside of the country, is that we all want the same thing. We all want food. Everyone loves food and they're excited about their food or their background. And we love having meals and talking about deals or celebrations over a meal. Everyone wants shelter. Well, most people want shelter, I want to say, and that's important. And for your mental health, that's very important. You need to know where you're living and where you're going to be. And then everyone wants some level of love, whatever that is, or to be loved or to be cared for. Even the hermit or the person that is full of hate, the hate comes from it's the person that has the most hate needs the most love. And that may not make sense, or may be hard to get that, but right now we are in this weird space because of COVID and the pandemic and what's happening overseas. And these people, I don't agree with what they're doing. And maybe their insensitivity, but it's not coming out of the air. It's not that they just got up one day and I want to take over a country, or I want to scream at someone because they're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or they're telling me to take a vaccine or not. What has occurred is that they have their inner problems and demons, and they don't know how to manage it, or they don't know how to communicate, and this is how they communicate with doing something that doesn't make sense, and hurting other people when they themselves are hurting inside.
Let's say you're on day 4 or 5 of a production, long hours, maybe there's been issues with the location, and there's someone that you deal with or different individuals on set whose communication skills are maybe different. Maybe they're more closed off. Maybe their arms are crossed every time you go talk to them. And you can kind of pick up that there's like this barrier, especially later on in the production. How do you smoothly do that? Or is it at some point it's just going to get tense? People are going to be human and arguments will happen.
I had this situation happen maybe multiple times, but I'm thinking of one specific situation that was very rough, for me. I was coming off of a feature and then I was jumping into a short that was very aggressive, and we had high-level talent. And my producing partner, looked great on paper, but he'd never ran a film set. And the line producer that initially came on ended up just walking. And I don't think it was frustration or anything because of us or the director, but he probably found a job that paid him a lot more, and he didn't want to do all the work. I think that's the honest truth. So on this project, I brought on a friend, colleague of mine that's kind of a producer. I asked her to come on as production manager, and I want to say, I don't remember if she didn't come at all that day, or maybe she came and just never came back to set again. But with this production, it was a big production. We started in Central Park, and I had a financier that was coming that had put on quite a bit of money into the project, and he wanted to come in, take pictures on set. He came with his entourage, and at the same time, I had talent checking in at a hotel nearby, wanted to make sure that he was okay and the other talent was okay. And at the same time, that day, the 59th Street Bridge, I think, was shut down. So our director of photography was running late with the camera, and our sound person didn't come. No call, no show. And I have to be 3 places at one time. I have to be on set with my crew. I have to be with the talent to make sure they're okay. And I have to be with the financier. And the AD couldn't really run the set. And not that he couldn't run the set, but they were not listening to him. And the reason that we got the crew that we got, which was amazing, like IATSE crew, was because of the DP. Our G&E department and our camera department. And this was day one. Everything went wrong. I needed to get a sound person. So I found someone that had submitted from before, and they wanted double the rate. And at this point, we were already spending money. So I had to bring on this person. And it was very difficult to manage all the expectations. I felt that I was failing my team, all aspects in terms of the financier wanting to be in and out and take pictures, and telling him, hey, we're trying to get cameras rolling. That's not important now, but I know you put this money in, so I know you need to be here, and you have somewhere to go, and you have all these people with you. So it was speaking with him and his people in a manner where they felt respected and not disrespected, and trying to manage the crew that is like, what the hell is going on? Why are these people here? And we just want to work. And then the talent expecting a level of treatment per se. And as the day went, it just got harder and harder. There wasn't a smart plan for the gas to get in the generator, and we fell behind schedule. And I probably lost a few crew members by the end of the night. And it was just very horrific. And I know the G&E team was really frustrated. They thought I didn't know probably what I was doing. And they did not listen to the AD. They only listened to the DP. And the second day, I promised that it would be a much better day. We had some problems on the first day with meals and the food getting there on time. And it was just a lot of dynamics happening at the same time. So I did get everyone fed. They did get fed a little later. And I focused on the food that day just to make sure that the food was really good, top of the line. And there was an issue, I want to say, with one of our main actresses, because she was playing the mother to this child. And one of the places I set up for holding happened to be a bar near set, and they would not allow the young boy in. And that didn't even go through my mind it would be a problem. And she was having emotional disconnect because that's her son. She was in character, and she would not do anything unless I was there. And I was focusing on making sure that, getting the food and working with the caterer just to make sure that the food was slamming that day. And I basically had to run and get over there, and I worked it out, and then she was okay, and everything was all right. And I could just feel the energy from the G&E crew and the camera crew. It was more probably the G&E crew that was more upset, and I pretty much had to do something about it because I felt that I was going to lose all of them, or it was just going to get worse. So I asked the Genie team to stop working and to come out and speak with me. They didn't know what it was about, and I had addressed everything that happened the day before. I had explained to them, which they knew about the camera and the bridge. I explained to them about the sound. I explained to them about the investor, and that they had put a good chunk of money in. I had this responsibility, and they probably didn't care, and I acknowledge that. I was very honest and blunt. You guys probably don't care. You just want you to do your job. I understand. I understand that you all ate late yesterday, and there was the gas was put in really late for the generator, and we've been behind schedule. I acknowledge everything that went wrong. I didn't ignore the pink elephant in the room. I acknowledged all of their concerns. I let them know all the dynamics I was facing yesterday, and basically I'm producing this whole shoot on my own, and I literally wrapped on a feature right before, and I haven't had a chance to take a break. And again, you guys probably don't care. You just want to do your job, get fed, and get paid. And I acknowledge that I will treat them all with respect. I will make sure that they get fed on time today, and that I pretty much did not go to sleep, maybe an hour or two, but I didn't go to sleep to make sure that I have, better food for them, because I had some people that were vegetarian and vegan and all these different things. And food was delayed the day before, so I made sure that wouldn't happen. And I felt that I had to have that conversation because they were only there because of the DP, and I didn't want them to walk or lose my team and then the project fall apart because of that. And it wasn't even a question. I knew I had to have this conversation, or they would probably start maybe disrespecting me or the set, or not listen, because they weren't listening to the first AD, when I wasn't there. So I wanted to establish like a level of authority as well, and keep it and not lose it. And also let them know that they are humans. I get that, and I'm not looking to be disrespectful to them or the project at all. So I feel that that's what I would do in any situation if it happened again, is just acknowledging what they or whatever person is going through, not ignoring the problem, letting them know that I'm aware, whether I can fix it or not, because a lot of times people want to be heard. And I want to make sure that they know that I'm listening, and I do care, whether I can make a decision or not. Sometimes I can't make a decision. I don't have the authority to, or it's a force outside of nature in terms of what can or cannot be done.
Wow, it sounds like, almost everything that could have gone wrong did.
Everything went wrong on that project. It was, sometimes you work on a production, and after you're done, you just don't want to produce anymore, and that's how I felt after this. I said, I don't want to be on a film set for a very long time. I can't manage this. It was very stressful, to the point where, I lost my drivers, and I had box trucks that had to move around with a lot of gear and equipment, and I had bonded lots that they had to get to, and I lost all my drivers, and I had to call. One of the PA's fathers really stepped up. He's a reverend. He's a God-fearing man. And I think it's because he was religious is like why he helped. And, also his son was a PA probably, but he was like my savior. He drove the other box truck and didn't mind. And I had to drive the box truck. I don't drive box trucks. I don't like driving box trucks, but if I didn't do it, no one else was, and we had to get this film done. There were a lot of people counting on it getting done, and there was a lot at stake. I had to deliver.
How many times do you have to read a screenplay before you know you want to make the movie?
It's been different every time. It varies. There's a project I'm involved with now called The Hearts of Men, and after I read it the first time, I was in. It's one of the best scripts I've ever read. which is why I've been working on it the last several years and pushing it with my team. So it was a no-brainer. As opposed to other projects, it's not always about the script. The script is the most important thing first, but it's about the team. So sometimes I love the script, but if the team is not a team I want to work with, or I'm not the proper fit, then I won't do the project. That's a major variable on the decision making. And then the other part that I look at is that if the script needs some work, is the screenwriter willing to do rewrites, and what is their schedule like? Are they easy to work with? Do they have an ego? And then do they have to direct? That's another thing. Are they flexible? And the other part is that I look at it backwards, like when, especially more now than before, earlier in my career, I have to see where it's going to go. And not to say that I will know the answer to that, but I have to get an idea of how this project will get bought and seen. Because it's one thing to get the project made, but if no one sees it, it's a waste of time. So I'm figuring out the distribution, like where is it going to go, what festivals make sense, and the time of the year it can go, all of the things before even, raising the money or putting the financial plan or getting talent, is that where is it going to live, and how long of a process do I believe this is going to take for it to go. So I look at all of that besides just the creative. I mean, there's some scripts that I've read that I love, but I just can't figure it out. So I'm not going to touch it. I don't want to overpromise, underdeliver, and I don't want to take on a project that I just can't support and give false expectations. I rather pass on it and have someone else take it on and know that the project's going to be made the proper and correct way.
What if you like the story, but okay, you know that one person has a big ego and maybe they're in charge or they have a large influence. Have you ever said, well, I know who this person is and I'm going to go in knowing that and try to work around it, and because I really want to be a part of this?
I have done that specifically once in my career, and it's always like a back and forth. At the end of the day, I'm glad that I worked on the project, and it was definitely worth it. I believe where I am at now, it really depends on who that person is, if I'm willing to, take that hit. It was a project that I was involved with that was supposed to shoot in New York, and it was moved to LA. And I was fine with that, but what I gathered from the person in charge, he didn't want me there because he wanted to bring his own people in from LA. Like, why is this guy from New York involved in this production? And what I noticed working with him and on set was that everybody kind of worked at his beckoning call. And that's not me. I'm not someone to kiss ass. And that was the tone that was there. I want to say throughout the entire process, I was the outsider, and there were some difficult, moments and hits that I had to take on that production. But working with the talent and working with the writer director and the team, it was so worth it. And our journey with the film, the festival, and it getting sold and bought and coming out, was great. It was so rewarding. But earlier on, before I came on, there was a moment where I wasn't sure if I was going to do it. And I know if I didn't do it, looking at it now, I would have regretted it. So it was a good, I would say, exercise, or just tucking my pride away and just doing what I had to do. And it was worth it at the end.
I like that, tucking it, but that's good. Because sometimes if you know what it is going in, you're like, okay, I'm going to adjust for that. This may not be who I am, but I like that. That's good. Tucking your pride away.
Yeah, having the right mindset.
Yeah, that's a great statement. Is it your policy to read a screenplay in its entirety, no matter how bad it is?
That's a very good question. I want to say earlier on, I'd always finish the script no matter what. But now I get so much material. It's very hard for me to do that. And I have a buffer, actually. I have a very good relationship with NYU. So I have a team of interns that usually work, with me. And I have them do coverage. And I have them look at the pacing, the character, the overall story. And I have them look for things that are important to me. So for example, there was a web series that was brought to me. They had done season 1. It was very successful. And I didn't know web series can have distribution. Apparently this one did, and it had a nice budget. And this was a queer filmmaker that brought it to me. And I want to say, the 3rd episode, one of my interns flagged this, and I had read it. I missed it, honestly. She is Puerto Rican, and she was telling me, like, look at this scene where this character or these characters go into a bar, and all of them are queer except for this young lady, and she's speaking to the bartender behind, and the bartender is a hard-working, back-breaking Latina. And it was just a stereotype that just didn't sit well. And she flagged it to me. And I had a conversation with her and the team about it. And I know that wasn't the filmmaker's intent. So when I circled back with him and spoke with him about my feedback and the team's feedback, I did bring that up. And I said that, one of my goals is to make sure that I work and empower women, BIPOC and queer communities. There's a problem with this specific scene, and he apologized. He was embarrassed, and he wasn't his intention, completely missed it. And long story short, he changed that. We ended up not working on the project together, but he was glad with making that decision, to making that edit for it. And there's been, I would say, colleagues, friends that have brought me projects, and the team was very against what was written in it, the misogyny, how the characters spoke. And the team that actually brought it to me was a team of young women. And I had brought up what my team had discussed, which was also a team of 7 young women. And I shared what they said and my thoughts on it. And their response is that, well, we understand, we agree, but this is the reality. This is actually based off what the writer has encountered, and this is spot on. So we're not trying to make women look bad in a certain way. We're women ourselves, and this is just authentic. And I understood what they were saying, and I got it. But for my purposes and my brand, I didn't want to get involved. But right now, the project, I believe, maybe it was shot or it's about to be shot. I did see that it's fully funded, and one of my colleagues that is, a person of color as well, he's a very prolific producer. I saw he got behind it, and he is really making it happen. And I have so much respect for him, and I know that I think he's as good, if not a better producer than me, to be frank. So it's just a personal choice. Again, not everything is right for me, and I'm not right for everyone. And I think these filmmakers are great. I just couldn't get behind, that story.
Sure. Was it misogyny that was shown in a way that it was making it acceptable? Or, because there are, misogynist people in the world,
Yeah.
Male and female. There's women that hate other women, and
Yeah.
that's a reality. And so did you just not want to have it be, was it shown in a way that it condoned it, or it seemed as if...
It was comedic. It was like romantic
okay.
comedy.
I see.
And
Okay.
some of the characters also were Latino. There were stereotypes in there. And it just made women look bad. It
Okay.
made, to my opinion, it made women look bad, and it made all of the Latin characters look bad. So when I had that conversation with the filmmakers, they agreed and understood, but this is their reality, and they want to stick to their story. And I'm not one to tell someone to change their story. If that's their truth, they should honor it. I just can't, for my brand and what I believe in, I just can't do that.
Sure. Do you think it's okay for someone within their own culture to show these stereotypes, or is it I mean, like, let's say if a man wants to write a female character, I'm not necessarily offended by it. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But I know some people feel that only the person being portrayed should really write those characters.
Um, there's this whole conversation with what's going on right now in terms of telling stories about people of color. And I will say that my opinion, I don't think it's a fact or whatever, that story, if it's told by someone that's not a person of color, someone on the team should be a person of color to verify and make sure it's authentic, and it should be genuine. It shouldn't be, let's just bring this person on to check that box, because that's not acceptable either. But if it's someone that's not a person of color telling the story, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think that a person of color should have the first, right of refusal or attempt. But if someone else is telling that story, I think to honor the story the right way, they should fact check and get someone that can verify or that can complement, the story. I think it's only right and fair. In terms of telling stories that may be offensive, and let's say it's a young woman telling a story that could be offensive. I mean, if it's their truth, who am I to tell them, or anyone's to tell them that they shouldn't tell that story? That's their story, and there's an audience, for that. I think that certain stories may affect a community, per se. Perfect example is that if you look at in the past, it's gotten much better, but a lot of stories around Muslim people, they show them as extremists, they're just very over the top. And that's not the reality of it. There are some extremists, but there's a small percentage. So yes, some of these things may have happened in the Middle East or other parts of the world. That's true, but that's not the only stories that need to be told, because the human experience is that people just look at Muslim people in that way, and that's not the case. So I think that there are individuals or filmmakers that should show other stories around Muslim people.
Sure. I mean, you could say that maybe someone that's not a person of color would want to, let's say if we took a Muslim individual, maybe they're being profiled, maybe they feel they're being monitored, their electronic communications, or when they feel they're being watched. And is it okay for someone that's not a person of color to write this story of someone that feels like they're being targeted and they're not doing anything wrong, but maybe the powers that be or people around them have said that they're bad? I don't know. Is that offensive? Is it okay to kind of tell their story if that's not someone who's actually living it? I think that's the big debate, and I think maybe is it done in a patronizing way, or isn't it done in a way that actually shows a person, a full person, and not just a stereotype of a person,
I think if it's a documentary, then it's very challenging to bat for that. I think if it's a narrative, they can tell that story. But again, it's getting those allies, because in the world that we're in right now, if someone else is telling that story, and when the word gets out through the trades or through the general public, people may boycott the film. So it's not helping the filmmaker, it's not helping tell the story, because people won't support it. So I think it's important to get some type of ambassador or brand ambassador that can confirm or fact check or kind of give it a stamp of not approval in terms of the story, but the things that can be harmful, because you can get backlash or can hurt your movie or career.
How do you find a good story?
I get pitched every day, all day, everywhere. Everyone has a story. I get submissions through talent management companies, talent agents, while I'm at a film festival, people that are not in the business as well. And it's just comes to me all the time. I want to say if I'm at a film festival or event, I'm constantly hearing pitches, and I mean, I'm doing the same too, pitching as well. I feel that for mainly industry events, probably for the most part, that's probably what I pay attention to. Like if it comes out of, like a project I found was out of Focus London during the end of 2020 on Zoom, where I met this filmmaker and he shared this incredible story. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, let me learn more, you know? And I meet with a lot of reps, so they tell me about their talent. They ask me what I'm looking to make, what I'm looking to do. So I look at who they work with and look at their work. Or if I go to a film festival and I see a film that I really enjoy, then I'll approach the filmmaker. And maybe networking events sometimes when I attend them. It's been a mixed bag how I've found material or come onto projects.
Sure. And you've written one, at least one yourself, right? A short film?
Um, I wrote a short that I never made. I have maybe collaborated, you know, in terms of story, you know, with the shorts that I've made in the past. Feature-wise, I haven't done any of that. And I'm actually writing something with a writing partner now, a project. But traditionally, I'm not a writer. That's not my lane.
How much does your intuition factor into choosing whether to say yes to a story, not the project or the people attached? I know you said that's important, but what if they're amazing people and you know you'd work great with them, but you're not sure about the story?
Um, I mean, my intuition is very important. It definitely is a major decision maker on that. And I'll have to sit with it with myself. You know, I'll have to meditate to it. And now I'm going to get really spiritual with you. I have to speak with like my guides, my angels, my spirit guides, just to make sure that it aligns. I ask for a sign, you know, whatever that is. That sign can be someone saying something or me reading something or me reading a license plate or, you know, ask for signs for alignment, for it to make sense, for it to be proper in my trajectory and what I'm looking to make and do.
When did you know that your intuition would never let you down? How old were you?
Probably recently, I want to say, within the past maybe 6 years or so, it got really stronger. Like I've always worked in my intuition, but say since 2016-ish, it got really strong. I was in, I went to Istanbul, besides everyone telling me not to go because it got a little dangerous around that time period. I was in between two bombings while I was in Istanbul. And even though this happened, I was in a place of bliss and happiness, and I felt like I had a strong awakening while I was out there. There's nothing that I did specifically. It was just a sense of the vibration and the energy and the frequency that I was at. And I just fine-tuned it over the years and just really believing in myself and doing work on myself and having the confidence in myself. So I'd say from 2016, from that moment, from that trip, maybe even earlier in the year, but that trip, it became very strong. And then it just got stronger and stronger, where I just knew myself.
Were you working on a film in Turkey?
No, I just had gone. I had this, my soul was telling me to go. Like, I was actually going to cancel and not go because of everything that was going on, but it was, I just had to go. If I didn't go, felt like I'd be miserable and just upset with myself. And I trusted myself and nothing happened and I was safe.
Can you share one of these signs that you've received? One of these guides or something that's signaled to you something on set?
So this was all in alignment, which with alignment to me, my definition of alignment is that I'm at the right place at the right time. I'm doing exactly what I should be doing, and it works creatively, and it hits the goals of what I'm looking to do, which is leave people touched, moved, and inspired, and tell very important stories. So this was during the pandemic. I was in LA, and it was a series of things that happened that led me there to this particular project that I'm in post-production on now. The screenwriter of The Hearts of Men, the project I mentioned, said that there was a buddy of his that I need to meet. And his name is Ron McCant, awesome, writer out of Orange County. And he was running these town hall meetings on Zoom with everything that was happening after what happened with George Floyd. And his goal is to just empower people of color and educate. And he was already doing this. And when we talked, we were trying to figure out what can I bring to the table? How can I help? And after brainstorming, we basically came up with this HBCU tour, because what we realize is that you can see people of color in front of the screen, but what's really important is people of color behind the screen, and changing that. And it starts at the college level. I feel that it starts at the college level, and mentoring and sharing those tools. So for a period of several months, we had these Zooms where we would have either it would be all female group, or it would be a panel of brown and black people sharing their experiences, and us inviting the Howards, the Spelmans, the Tuskegee schools, and just educating what we do and how to be successful, internship programs. I felt like we built a really good dynamic information hub, but also an execute hub, because we can give all the information in the world, but people need something to execute with. So we had built a program for people to learn visual effects through a company called Chicken Bone. They're in El Segundo, but they're worldwide. The head of the company is El Segundo, and he's become a great friend. And he developed a program where people can intern or learn about VFX, because most people don't know about VFX. And we found other individuals that were showing how to be able to get a project, to produce a project that's coming out of AFI, just really high level, things. So one of the people I worked with was a young lady that had went to USC. She had graduated, and she was president of a film club. And one day she mentioned to me like, hey, there's a young man in New York that wants to tell this story. He's been trying to get it done before the pandemic happened. And this was, I want to say, we're in 2022. So this was in early 2021, I want to say, late 2020, maybe early 2021. And I said, yeah, I'd love to, hear more about it, because the kind of work that I'm making. And, she'd mentioned it was a short. Would you be open to it? And I said, well, it just really depends on the message. And when I got the script, I recognized the writer's name, the writer-director's name. And this gentleman I had met 2 years ago, because there was another young man from NYU. So the young lady that had introduced me went to USC, but this young man that wrote the script went to NYU grad. And I had met him 2 years ago because a friend of mine had done a film called My Nephew Emmett that won, I think it was either the student Oscars or he won the Oscars as a short. And it was a very impressive short around, Emmett Till. And it was playing somewhere in Williamsburg. And I went to the screening, and there were other films that were playing. And he introduced me to this young man, and he was West Indian. And he had this amazing short that he did, and I was blown away. I was like, wow. And from that point, I just kind of tracked him and what he was up to, his career. And then I had saw that he had a fellowship at Sundance through Black House. Very dear friends with the founder of Black House, and I always go there when I'm at the Sundance Film Festival. And I was like, wow, I'm following his journey. I'm so happy for him. And then he ended up working, well, he didn't end up working. He ended up getting like, I think the Jack Daniels Award. I don't remember how much money he received, but Omari Hardwick had given him the check. He was the presenter, and I had worked with Omari on a film that had gone to Sundance. So all these things had kind of happened. And when I saw his name on the script, I'm like, oh my God, like this is an opportunity to work with him. And I've been tracking him for so long. Just part of it is strategy, and part of it is just if I see something and I see his name somewhere, like then I look a little bit more. So it was organically too. And when that came to me and the pieces were kind of together, I'm like, wow, like I'd love to work with him. And after reading the story was based off a documentary, a PBS documentary that was made. It was inspired. It wasn't based off the documentary. It was inspired off the documentary. And the documentary had done really well. And it dealt with a young, a young 16-year-old man that was incarcerated as an adult for a crime that he was, I want to say he was going to commit, but he didn't commit it. And he was forced by the abuser to do this crime. It wasn't his choice. And it was very hard to watch that documentary. It makes you want to cry, and, you get upset with the system. And I felt it was my responsibility to help tell the story and get behind the writer-director and the story. And it just aligned with my vision, my goals, and the fact that I've been just tracking this young man. So it just made sense. I had read the script. I had some notes on it. I had shared it with the team. They had notes on it. So I knew it still needed work, but I knew I wanted to work with him, and I liked the premise of the story, which is why I got behind it. And this was like the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, I want to say. And we shot it November of 2021. So now it's in post. And probably the end of this year, or late or fall of this year, we'll begin our festival submission, with this project.
Have you ever crashed a set?
I've crashed a lot of film sets. That used to be my MO. That was the thing that I did very earlier on in my career. I haven't done that in a long time. I usually get invited now to set. There was one particular time that I want to share about where this was, again, very early in my career when I was just starting. I was very green in business, and I just wanted to make things happen. So what I would do is look at there are websites where you could find where a film is shooting, the street, the days they're shooting, maybe the project, they'll make up a different name for it, and they'll change the name of the actors that are in it, or they'll just have their character name, just to be discreet. But I would do a ton of research and figure it out and just pop up. And if there was someone I wanted to work with or get in front of, I had like a plan of how I wanted to talk to them, what I wanted to say. I'd say that a lot of the times it did work. It was successful. There was this time where a friend of mine that lived in Staten Island, she was not in the business, but she was in entertainment and loved the arts, and she knew that I would crash film sets. And this friend of mine in Staten Island, she went on to tell me like, hey, they're shooting this movie, in Staten Island, and James was writing and directing it. And it must have been like 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I called my ex-business partner. I said, I found out this information. And he's like, I'm available. I said, let's go. So we drove from Long Island to Staten Island, over the Verrazano Bridge. We got to the film set, and it wasn't a huge set, but it was a decent sized set. And we just kind of blended in and just waited for them to wrap. We were just being respectful. And back then, James was always known for wearing a suit, and tie. When he directed, it was funny. That was his thing. So at the end, when they wrapped, we approached James, and I introduced myself and told him how much we, loved his work and, the stuff they'd written before, and that we wanted to build a relationship with him, and if we could get his contact information. And he shared his phone number and email, which was really freaking cool. And then what happened later on is that I had produced a short that we took to the short film corner at the Cannes Film Festival. And we had told James that we were going, and he said, hey guys, well, you should meet with my producing partner, this guy named Sebastian. And Sebastian works with him a lot. And he said that Sebastian had like 3 films in competition, which it's hard to get 1 film in competition, but Sebastian had 3. Sebastian is French. So we met with Sebastian at some fancy hotel in Cannes. I don't remember the name of it, but I remember like it was yesterday. It was just a great highlight of my career, just remembering it. Like, it was bright, it was a beautiful hotel, and Sebastian is telling us about his movies, and then working with James and telling us about some little movie they did. Michael Bay put his name on it, and Universal will get behind it because of Michael Bay, and Ethan Hawke is in it. And then it's a little movie, they'll see how it does. And at the end of the whole thing, he said that, well, there's an after party for one of my films tonight. Here's 2 tickets. Love for you 2 to come. And they were like these golden tickets. Like, I imagine these like old tickets from the 1600s or whatever, 1700s. And they were like golden tickets and had the name of the venue and all these things. And this was kind of ballsy of me to do, but at the time, we had this intern named Cassandra, and she spoke every language under the sun, and she came out there with us. And it was very interesting because when we were planning to go to Cannes, we were looking at where to stay, and she was like, we never really knew her deal. But she said, yeah, well, since you guys are going to go to Cannes, I have a house out there. And we're like, wait, you have a house in Cannes? It's right outside of Cannes. It's in Ducap, which is a very fancy area. And she ended up living in like a mansion, which is ridiculous. So we stayed with our intern in her, mansion. Her family owns it, so it's not really her house, but she has a boat and all these things. And we learned all these things about Cassandra, and she took very good care of us and drove us to all of our meetings and things at Cannes. So I asked Sebastian and said, listen, I know you have 2. You're probably limited with what you can give, but Cassandra's here with us. She's a really good person. She's kind and she's appropriate, and we are staying with her, and I don't want her to just be at home when we're at this thing or drop us off. And is there any way you could spare an extra ticket? And he looked at me, and then he took the phone, made a phone call, and I used to speak fluent French. I don't speak fluent French, but he spoke something in French, hung up the phone, and he went back in his pocket and gave us a 3rd ticket. So Cassandra was able to attend with us, and it was my first, time at Cannes this time around. And it was everybody that was an A-lister with this was at this thing, LFMAO. I don't know how you say it. They were there. I think the Smurfs was coming out, the producer of the Smurfs. And the venue was like this castle on a mountain, and there was a long line to get into this thing. With our golden tickets, we skipped the line, walked straight in, and it was one of the best nights that I had in Cannes. And I've been to Cannes. That was my first time to Cannes. I'd gone one other time after. But yeah, it was just amazing. And Sebastian was a pipeline, for us. And then we ended up selling that short film to Sorts International. Until this day, I still get a residual check every like 6 months to a year. It's not a lot of money, but a few $100. We've made decent money on that short. It was sold worldwide, and about a year later, NBA Finals. That film, that little movie that Sebastian and James DeMonaco were talking about was called The Purge, and it changed James's life. And I called up James. I'm like, James, I want to rock with you. Like, how can I get involved with you and do more? And he's like, listen, Ramfis, there's not much I can do. I'm a writer-director, but, if you ever need any support, call my agent. And I developed a relationship there. And the assistant, this guy named Michael, he was a great assistant. He now is an agent at the Verve Talent Agency, and we've become, friends. And anytime I need something at Verve, I could go to him, And that all started because I took the risk to, go out, to, Staten Island to meet this guy. So that's probably the most successful, story, in terms of that. And there's been many other times where I've just popped up on sets and it hasn't worked. I was an extra on American Gangster, and that was when I first started acting, and it was the first big movie I did extra work on, and it was just amazing to see Ridley Scott work and all the talent. Like, just everybody was in that movie, Idris Elba and Denzel and Russell and T.I. It was an incredible experience. And the day that I was there, there was no way, there was an opportunity for me to get in front of Denzel. And the reality of it is that everybody wants to talk to Denzel. I just remember when they were in Harlem shooting the scenes, and like the neighbors had their windows open in the projects, and you could just hear all these women saying, "I love you, Denzel." It was just so classic. It was like, oh my God. I felt like I was in Training Day watching that scene where, he's in the projects and everybody in the hood is like a blood gang member. That's what it felt like, And it was just wild, just being there, and everybody just like went to go ask for an autograph or take a picture. And that wasn't my goal or intention. And I wanted to speak to him. I'll tell you why in a second. So I said, let me go talk to Ridley Scott. So I went up to Ridley Scott. There weren't as many people lined up for him. There were people lined up for him, but not compared to Denzel. And I just complimented him on his work, what he's done. Very familiar with all his work and his accomplishments. Not that he cares that I'm, me, the extra, is complimenting him. He probably doesn't care. But, I just was genuine with it. And I was very ballsy with what I said. I said, listen, I want to work with you. How can that? And this is when I was, just acting. I wasn't really thinking about producing as much, I just thought about it a little bit, but I was just telling him that. And I guess inappropriate to tell him that, And what happened next was that I'd asked him for his phone number. I said, listen, I want to give you a call. Let's sit down, take you to lunch. And, doesn't quite work that way. And his first AD was there in time to save him and get him out. And he said, no, contact me. And that meeting with Ridley Scott never happened, What I ended up doing, again, which was really ballsy, this is before WME was formed. There was William Morris Agency and Endeavor. I called his office and I said, met Ridley, we hit it off well, and I want to work with him, so how do we get started? Something along like that. I got the assistant, and I guess the assistant knew, like, this is not going to work. And, I'd sent my headshot and resume and my black and white that I just got made. And I followed up, and, after I submitted and checked in, I'm like, all right, I'm ready to work with Ridley. And the guy at the time, he just said, no, it's not going to work. And I realized I wasn't going to get through. This is not going to work. So I changed my strategy, and I said, hey, you are going to be an agent one day. You know what I'm trying to do. Let's build a relationship. And that's what happened. Me and the assistant developed a relationship. I came out to LA, and then we went to some sushi restaurant that people used to love going to. I can't remember the name of it, but we had like this really nice dinner. It was somewhere in West Hollywood. And I developed a relationship with this guy that was on his way to becoming a talent agent. Unfortunately, he got caught up. It spiraled down for him, and he had to leave the industry. So it didn't quite manifest into that, but I believe I accomplished my goal, and it was a good friendship that me and this gentleman had created. And now back to Denzel. I did want to get in front of Denzel. The reason was that I heard he was getting ready to direct, and I wanted to work with him. He was on his way to do this movie called The Great Debaters, and I wanted an opportunity to at least audition and be in the film. So there was a day that I was not scheduled to be on set, and I found out where they were going to be shooting. I crashed the set, and I blended in. And there's a smart way to do it where, people are not going to kick you off set. That's what I figured. Just reading the temperature of the set and the body language, and you're not doing anything inappropriate. So I just kind of just like walked around, and then at some point, Denzel walked out of this restaurant or whatever. He was completely by himself. Oh my God, this is my moment. So I took that moment, went up to him. I said, Denzel. He turned around, and I introduced myself. I spoke with him. And then someone turned around, because there's always eyes on him. He's A-list talent. Someone realized that, wait a second, I'm not supposed to be there. I'm speaking to him. No, 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 no. And they ran over and interrupted, and said that he had to go, and then I had to leave, and there was someone else that I got to know on set there, and he came up to me and he said, listen, what you did was like, it's not appropriate, and, it's probably good if you leave. And he's like, I had the option, not that I had the option to leave or not to leave, but I just thought, like, what's the highest good here? I could stay and try to do this again. But now, it kind of squandered my plans. So I didn't think it would be smart if I did stay and try to get in front of him again because of just the way the interaction went. So I ultimately decided just to leave. But it's funny because I ended up developing a really good relationship with Denzel Whitaker, who got the role that I wanted. And we actually worked on this project with David Oyelowo 2 years ago. And it kind of just came back full circle, like Denzel Whitaker and I have become like the dearest of friends, and, we're homies. But even though it didn't work out, I'm glad that I took that shot because I live in a place of, I don't want to be in a coulda, woulda, should've. I know that I tried, and I'm happy with what I at least did. I know that it just didn't work out. It wasn't in, I guess, my best for it to work out, or the project's best. And I'm happy that Denzel Whitaker took that role, because after that, he became who he is now.
I like your stories. What have you thought of working with a screenwriter? Like, if you had one about just the whole thing you talked about with Cassandra. You have this intern. She speaks all these languages. You're thinking, great, we've got these 2 golden tickets to Cannes, and then you find out she's got this family man. I mean, that's like its own movie right there.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
can't make it up.
driving around 2 eager producers like in France. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
There's no way I would
kinda-
have driven around in France because the Vespas, like the way to drive the Vespas, I feel like I would have hit one of these guys. And the car we rented was stick shift. And granted, I know how to drive stick shift, but I'm not great at it. And we're up these hills where if you went a little bit too far right, you'll fall over the cliff with no barrier. I was extremely terrified to drive in Italy the way that they drive. And not Italy, I'm sorry, France. We went to Italy after. We flew into Milan, got the car from Milan, and drove to, Cannes, Cap Ferret. And so there's no way I would have done that. I don't feel comfortable driving out there the way that they drive, especially a stick shift vehicle.
on hills.
So yeah, Cassandra was so clutch and so meaningful to that trip that we had, my first time at Cannes.
How do you attract name talent to a movie?
I think a lot of it is just being genuine, like at the end of the day, whether it's film or not film or whatever position, it's just being authentic and genuine, because people could sense the BS, if you're just trying to sell them or whatever. So I always come from a place of authenticity, and telling them why I want to work with them, whether it's in an email or social media or whatever the case is. But what I've done is that I've figured out where a certain actor or actress is going to be that I may want to work with. So maybe they have a film premiering at a festival, or let's say I will attend, like a screening, a private screening that's happening. Like I'll track screenings, so for example, I'm a member of BAFTA. And now it's BAFTA, I think America. So I can go to BAFTA screenings in New York, LA, and the UK. So if there's a particular talent that I want to work with, a lot of times they'll end up going, to a Q&A at BAFTA. And I've approached numerous actors that way, anywhere from like Orlando Bloom to Mark Ruffalo, to individuals like that. And it's not necessarily easy to get in front of them, but I look for a window after the Q&A. Usually I try to go actually as soon as it ends, because sometimes they just run out, and I'll just pull them to the side. If they have a rep or don't have a rep there. If they have their rep there, it's a little bit more difficult because their rep will try to shut it down. But if their rep is not there, usually their publicist is there, if their rep's not there. But I go right to the point. I talk about their past movies, what they've done, why I like them, and that I want to work with them, and can I contact them directly? And I want to say, in the terms of Mark Ruffalo, I was at a screening for Dark Waters in New York, and he just hung out. He just hung out the entire time afterwards, which I was really shocked. And he talked to everyone, and he was super kind. And I told him that at the end. I'm like, I can't believe you talked to everybody and stayed. And he asked me a little bit about who I was and what I was making, what I was doing, and I pretty much answered those questions. And without even asking, he had offered me his email address, which was insane. I mean, did I end up getting him for the project, that I mentioned to him? No, it didn't happen, but I believe it was authentic and genuine, like the conversation, which is why he gave me the time of the day, and entertained it. And the same thing happened with Orlando Bloom. I went to a screening of Carnival Circus in New York, and he was there, and he was coming out. One of my favorite movies is Kingdom of Heaven, another Ridley Scott film. Told Ridley Scott the same thing, how I love Kingdom of Heaven, and I told Orlando Bloom how I love that, and Troy, and all the other things that he's done, and he's like, oh yeah, that's great, man. We could find. It's probably typical. He hears, oh, I want to work with you. And he's like, yeah, we should find something to work on, just passing through. I said, actually, I have something. And I just went right into my pitch. And he was like, wow, taken back. And he flagged over his assistant. Assistant came over, and we exchanged info, and we started conversation. Did it manifest into anything? No. Probably, the rate we offered him was too low, and maybe he wasn't impressed with the filmmaker. And the thing that was probably logically true is because he probably had he didn't have availability. He was probably booked out, I ran into Frank Grillo one time in West Hollywood, and I happened to be wearing a Purge t-shirt. So I saw him, I flagged him down. I'm like, Frank, how, and he's like, wait a second, you're wearing the shirt, and it's just, it all aligned, like, right place, right time. And I told him how I knew James, and he loves James, and he's telling me about another movie that he did with James and Naomi Watts, and we're having a conversation. And then I'm like, dude, I've tried to, work with you multiple times. I've tried to go through your agency, your rep at, the Creative Artists Agency, and they can be very difficult. And I, listed his agents and his manager. I have a very good memory. And so he knew I was serious. And like, did you ever read the script? He never heard of it. Like, oh, that's not a surprise. I've heard this story many times, how talent doesn't get material. And then I talked about his production partner. He works with Joe Carnahan a lot, and I mentioned that I'm very close with his publicist, and I was invited to a screening of a film that he had coming out, and I couldn't get into LA for that reason whenever it had happened. So he's like, dude, why don't you just contact me directly going forward? That's what he said. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I'd love that, and then he gave me his number and his email, and then I just stayed in touch. I followed up with him about the project that, I wanted him to work on. And ultimately he just told me that he wasn't available, and to keep him in mind for whatever else, to reach out. It just didn't work out, So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, in terms of this thing. But I have a very aggressive approach, and I want to get in front of people because they'll see the passion I feel, and that this person is like 100% legit on board, and that I appreciate the film process and the study, and I'm not just like a fan. I'm not just saying I want to work with them. I have legitimate reasons and I'm able to back it up. And I make sure that when I share whatever information about working with them, I kind of just tee it up. This is the project. This is when we're looking to shoot. This is the budget. We have the money. We don't have the money. These are the pieces. This is why we want you on it. You know, how can we make it work? Straight to the point. So they know I'm serious. I'm not hesitating, and I'm doing it in a concise manner. I don't necessarily rehearse it, but in the beginning, probably I did. I've gotten to a point where I'm just comfortable. It's a conversation and like, these are how projects happen and come together. So I've done that. Also done the social media thing where maybe reaching out. I've done it once on Instagram where it has worked. There was a foreign project I was putting together, and there's a very famous, I want to say, Italian actress. I didn't necessarily do it, but I had someone on the team reach out, and she read the material, and she was interested. It didn't work out because we didn't get all of the money, to make it happen. But that had happened, one time. Other times, one of the things that I do is that I did a film with Mercedes Rule, and it was a short way back when. And one of the actors had a really good relationship with her, had worked with her before, and we basically just went through her directly. We never dealt with her agents or reps, and she came on board. So one idea that I always say is like, you get one, you get all their friends, So that's the strategy that I use, and they want to work with their friends, So that's one way. Just getting a list from them, like, who do you know? Who do you have a relationship with? Who would be, like who you've been trying to work with? Sometimes it's going through the agent directly. I do really well in Europe. The agents are a little bit more, I want to say, flexible. So if the actor or actress has rep in the US and in Europe, especially if it's a European project, I'm going to go through their reps over there. I've been able to like somewhat attach talent that way. It doesn't always work, especially if their US agent is not like friendly, then they'll shut it down. Sometimes that works. And then obviously using a casting director, that's been one way. A lot of the times, if I don't have the bandwidth or the energy, or I just can't figure out how to get in front of a certain actor or actors, we'll just use that. And it's a lot of work to honestly, there was a project I really wanted to get Jamie Foxx involved in. And I think the night before, there was a screening happening in LA. I found out on a Friday night. A friend of mine told me about the screening, and I was trying to figure out how the hell to fly from New York to LA to get there in time. I couldn't find a flight to match it, and the flights were very expensive. And I was like, oh man, I really want to make it, So it just didn't work out, So there's times like that where it just doesn't work, and it'll be very hard to get in front of him. I've done that with Idris Elba one time where I was actually at his party at Sundance, and his producing partner was going to introduce us, but when he had wrapped up, he DJs a lot. He was wrapping up his DJ set. His security detail just surrounded him because there were a lot of people there, and I guess he didn't want to talk to anyone, and he just bolted. So the producing partner couldn't introduce me. So I had gone down to Art Basel in Miami, and I knew he was going to be there at this club DJing. And I went to the club and I waited for him to come. And he came out, of course, but it's really dark, it's loud, and there's a million bodies in front of you. And I just couldn't get through. I legit couldn't get through. And I was just like so pissed. I'm like, I can't believe I did all this to get through in front of him. I can't even talk to him. And even if I did, a part of me is like, it probably wouldn't work because he's DJing and it's so loud and he's not going to stop DJing to talk to me. So I thought out like how it could work. Like sometimes it works out where there's a moment where they're by themselves or whatever, and you get that moment to talk to them. And other times it's just impossible because of security around them, or, it's a loud venue. But I would say my success rate is pretty high because, again, I'm very polished and buttoned up when I approach an actor or actress. And it's not as a fan, I have an agenda. I have proof of whatever I'm talking about. I make sure it's in a place that it has some type of element that's exciting, whether it's an exciting writer or director or both, or a production company or producer, or I have money. I'm not going to come with a bad script with nothing, you know, because it just doesn't make sense, you know. So just along the way, I've just met a lot of great talent just being at festivals, you know, like just walking in Santa Monica. One day I'm walking and oh man, it's like Craig Robinson. And then I walk over, I'm like, wait, are you Craig? You look like Craig. He's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, you know, I said like, I'd love to, you know, like work on something with you. And he's like, oh, cool. We should find something to work on. And I'm like pitching him and I'm like, dude, give me your number then. You know, he's like, okay. Gives me his number and his email. And then we started a friendship, a relationship. So I just reach out to Craig. You know, I brought him projects and unfortunately, it just didn't hit, you know, like he wasn't interested in it or wasn't what he wanted to make and do. So just, you know, and we just said, hey, we'll find something one day eventually, but I have that open lane where I don't have to go through his reps or whatever or be blocked. So I've done that quite a bit with a few actors and developed relationships with. And it's out of the box. Most people aren't thinking, they might be intimidated or they don't know what to say. And maybe in the beginning, I would have been really nervous, but I've practiced so many times, like doing Toastmasters. And Toastmasters is a non-for-profit group that helps with public speaking. So I've practiced my public speaking so many times in a group in front of one person. Some people are good one-on-one and they could talk one-on-one, and some people are good at talking to a group. I've practiced both just to be able to, because I believe that it's my responsibility to be the best producer I can. So that's investing in myself. You know, this has nothing to do with film, but taking classes where I can be the best me, so I can show up the best way. And that's really helped me to be able to do these things and figure things out. So that's one of the ways that I find and attract talent or work with talent. But I've done everything under the sun, as you can see, to work with talent.
Do you adjust your approach based on New York, LA, Europe? Like, is there an LA approach that would not work in New York and vice versa?
The thing is that I try just to feed into like how I would do it. I don't look at the fact that I'm in New York or LA because what I've been told by my colleagues in LA is that it's inappropriate. Don't do it. You know, like you could be shamed for it or whatever. And I've seen it being in an LA party or whatever. There'll be like some cool person, you know, and people just like pretend that they're not there, but they know they're there. And it's like weird, you know what I mean? Oh, it's like, it belittles you if you like go and talk to them and, you know, like, no, like I'm just gonna go in, it doesn't matter. And, you know, and I use my personality. That's where I feel comfortable in myself, you know, whether they say they don't want to talk to me or not, they could just say no, you know, like, I don't want to talk to you. I'm not interested. I want to say most actors that I've met and approached, you know, I just come in really direct, like, hey, this is my name, this is what I do, want to work with you, love your work, what you've done, this is the project, how can we do this? And they'll say maybe, you know, contact their reps, I'll deflect. I did that with Eddie Redmayne. I ran into him right after when he was nominated, I think. And he didn't want to give me his direct info. So he said, if you really want to contact me, don't want to deal with my reps, you know, don't want to deal with my agent, contact my manager, you know? And so my manager, you know, responds, don't worry about it, you know, and that's what I did. So it's their level of comfort. If they don't want to give me their email or phone number, then that's fine. Then what's the best way to contact you, you know? So, yeah.
Does rejection challenge you?
In the beginning, I think rejection was, you know, very challenging. But the thing is that people say no for so many reasons. And sometimes it's no because they woke up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes it's just legitimately they're not interested. So, because I've rejected, you know, projects or not necessarily people, but things. And, you know, it just doesn't align or the timing's off or, you know, I was speaking with a colleague of mine yesterday that won an Oscar last year, and he was nominated for another Oscar in another movie. He's done 2 really big movies, and he has 2 other really big movies coming out, and, you know, and everyone's going after him right now. And he's like, listen, like, I want to do projects where I collaborate with people. I don't want to just do jobs. And the thing is that I can't do everything. And a lot of times I turn down really big paychecks or opportunities or, you know, getting offered an overall deal. and it doesn't make sense, but this is my process, you know? And I want to spend time with my family. I want to do this. I need to take 2 months off after this movie comes out, the end of this year. And just hearing that, it's like, okay, cool. Like he's rejecting, you know, really big, his agents, he's rejecting, you know, big money opportunities. He's rejecting, you know, A-list people on the level of, you know, Spielberg and, you know, it wasn't Spielberg, but that level. And, you know, it's not because he's rejecting them. It's just that it just doesn't fit with what he's doing right now. And he wants to be the best him when he does a project. So when I go to someone and pitch them and they reject me, you know, I don't make up a story. I look at it for what it is. What it is that they said no, and that was it. They're not rejecting Ramfis, the individual. They're not rejecting even the project. Maybe they just don't have the capacity, or maybe they're dealing with, you know, a sick child or a sick family member. There's so many things that could be going. And I read this book called The Four Agreements, and one of the rules in the Four Agreements is don't take anything personal. So I've embodied that with my day-to-day, just not to take things personal.
Ramfis, do you have a project for almost everyone? So if we saw A, B, or C walking down the street somewhere in Hollywood, Santa Monica, would you be like, oh, so-and-so, I love your work, and you know their work inside and out, you know their IMDb credits?
It's 50-50. Like half the times I have something that'll fit because I fluctuate with multiple projects. I have a slate, you know, of different genres. So I would say 50% of the time I have something that would be great for them to do. The other 50% of the time I don't, you know. But when I don't have something, like if I ran into Jennifer Aniston, for example, I don't have anything that would be for her per se, but it'd be good to have that in the back pocket if I have a project that makes sense. So I'll give you a real story of what happened. I was at Sundance Film Festival. This was 2018, and I was going to a party that Christine Vausan was throwing from Killer Films, really dear friend, and I was going into the party, but at Sundance you have to be on a list. It's very strict, and the group in front of me couldn't get in because they weren't on the list. The group behind me, or the guy behind me, the guy in front of me couldn't get in, and the girls behind me couldn't because they weren't on the list. But the guy in front of me, we hit it off so well. And I went into this party, and it was for the film that they had done with Dominic West and Keira Knightley. They were there. I didn't approach them because they were like in this area and there was a lot of security. And it probably just didn't look right or good if I broke that line. So I didn't do that. So I just engaged with Christine and, you know, the people at Killer Films, and I went and spoke with, you know, other individuals that were there. So I met a guy that was a talent, I think he was a talent agent, became talent manager. Or maybe he was a talent manager. No, he was a talent manager, you know. And then I met with another guy that's a financier, you know. They went later on to finance Parasite, which was really cool. And we just hit it off so well. So I stayed in touch with these two. They both lived in LA. And then when I wrapped up at Sundance, I went to LA. I usually spend like a month in LA afterwards, just doing all my follow-ups with people I've met. And then the guy that was in front of me that couldn't get in, I'd met with him, and he told me about what he was doing. He's Canadian. He's between Canada and LA. And he told me that he would send me some of the projects he was involved with. So he'd sent me one project in particular that I read. I found it really interesting. And I was telling him, just giving a report of, you know, who I've met and the relationships, because sometimes the access that I have can like fit. So I told him that I met this talent manager in the party that he couldn't get in, that I got into. And the talent manager, they represent Billy Bob Thornton. So he's like, oh my God, I have that project you read. Billy would be great to direct, you know? And what I was told was that Billy was looking for stuff to direct, you know, as well. So I was able to set up the relationship, and then they had the money in the bank. They were able to make an offer for Billy to direct the film. So I had all the pieces to basically put it together, and he said if I could make this happen, I'd come on as a capital P producer, I'd be involved. I went to the manager and I told him exactly what happened, and he said, send me the material, I'll read it, And I sent him the offer as well, so he knows that there was actual money. And it was a significant offer. And then he gave the script to Billy Bob Thornton, and what ended up happening was that Billy didn't connect with the material. He said he passed. It wasn't for him. But in a perfect world, you know, Billy would have said yes. He would have directed the film. You know, the financing came through this guy that I met online and the script, and you know, it all comes as one. So with that said, when you ask me in terms of like talent, sometimes, you know, it's like I'll get the right pieces to put it together to activate it, you know? So I always think about that. I have 6,000 phone numbers in my phone. I don't always think of everything and all the pieces, but there's a way for me to make it work, if that makes sense, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I would still approach the talent and tell them XYZ, and I'd love to find something to work with them on, you know? And it really depends. When they're on that level of DiCaprio or Jennifer Aniston and Vin Diesel, it's really hard, you know, to get in front of them one-on-one, because they're always around somebody. And it's going to be very difficult to get Leonardo DiCaprio's like phone number, you know. But it's not impossible. You know, I've seen him at Cannes. If I really wanted to get in front of him, there's a way, but it would be very difficult to navigate it. But I would still take the shot.
How do you raise money for a movie?
That's a good question. Every project has been different. How I've put it together and figured it out. It's been various ways. Sometimes it's been grant money from, for example, SF Film does grants and they give a lot of money away to projects that warrant the money. So I go to SF Film or Tribeca Film Institute. Well, TFI is not here anymore, but in the past I have, as well as Sundance has various labs. And there's other festivals as well that have some type of lab or dynamic to be able to do that. But outside of that, I go to places where I can find money. One of the ways I raised money on a project was that, at least in Long Island, there's country clubs everywhere. And in the summer, there are golf tournaments. And in New Jersey too, in upstate, Westchester. So I go to events where there's people that have that type of money. So I've gone to a golf tournament. I was at the table getting like my seltzer water with lemon and lime as usual. And this guy came up to me and he's like, "Oh, what do you do? What's your story?" And he's a very interesting guy, not in film. He's kind of like a startup guy, and he's been in some really great ventures and made good money. And I told him like what I do and why I was there. And he's like, "Well, I know someone that you should talk to." And that was it. So I followed up with him, put me in touch with this guy. And I set up a meeting with this guy. And I still to this day don't know if he's a CPA or if he's a tax attorney. I still don't know. And I pretty much went in and I met with him and I told him what I do. And I'm like, you know, I'm assuming that he has clientele or clients that have access to money that can invest. Because that was always the thing I did. I look for CPAs or lawyers that have a lot of clientele on that level, that have that kind of income because they maybe need to lose money or they need to have write-offs or maybe they'll be open to that venture. So he looked at me and said, "I don't have anyone like that," you know? And I'm like, "Why are we even here? How did this meeting even get set up?" He didn't even know what the meeting was about. I didn't even know who he was. And he's like, "Well, you know, I invested in some plays and, you know, I've done a movie or two." And I'm like, "Oh, you're the guy." And he's like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "I should be pitching you then." So I pitched him and, you know, he's like, "All right, send me all the paperwork and everything. I'll look at it." So I followed up with him. And then like a month later, met up with him again. This time I came with my team. At the time I had representation. I came with my manager and, you know, let him know that we're like legit. We're not going to take the money and run to Aruba. And he was like, "Okay, all right. You know, send me more paperwork and let me think about it." Sent the paperwork again, followed up with him a month later, like he said. He didn't read it. You know, he hasn't looked at it. He hasn't had the time. He's very busy. I get it. especially dealing with people's taxes or if he's a tax attorney, whatever. And then ultimately I went in that third time, just one-on-one with him and pitched him, and he cut me the check, just like that. So, does it always happen like that? No, and even till this day, he calls and checks in on me like, hey, he wants to, I was a member at the Friars Club, so I'd bring him there. The Friars Club is a prestigious private club in New York, where Frank Sinatra, the Rat Pack, they were all members. They're the ones that started the Comedy Roast. So I was a member there for many years. And while being there, I would bring and entertain potential financiers. And the owner of the Minnesota Vikings is a member, I remember going in one night, and I'm a curious person. I ask questions. And I saw that one of the rooms that's never really booked up for private events was closed. And it was our Thursday night cabaret night. And I asked one of the waiters that worked there, what's going on? Why is the room closed? Oh, this guy's celebrating, he sold his company. I'm like, oh, that's cool. How much did he sell his company for? He sold it for $980 million. I'm like, whoa, who is this guy? I need to meet him. And everything is private, in a private club. So people don't really want their business being known. So I said, listen, give me the intel. I won't say your name. I'll just, say I found out. So I waited for this thing to end. And then I approached this guy, and I said, congratulations. And he doesn't know who the hell I am. Congratulating him. He's probably like, I'm like, yeah, man, they call him the Wolf, he was slick, this guy, he's like, guy became a billionaire, selling his company. And he was well off before he sold the company. So, I'm congratulating him and telling him how proud I am of him. And it's amazing. And, I know he probably had this whole story in his head, what the hell is this guy talking about? Who is he? And then we just stayed in touch, and I'd see him at various events, once in a blue. And he always just told me when the time is right, if there was something that made sense, to approach him. I never did approach him. There wasn't something I felt, because I feel that you have one shot sometimes, especially with a billionaire. So I want to make sure it's something that's a no-brainer. It lines up. I mean, this guy is screaming A-list, so the project is not going to be something with an ensemble cast of working actors in television. This is probably going to be with Brad Pitt, then he's going to pay attention. He's that kind of guy, So being in a private club has helped a lot, the Friars Club. I'd met so many, financiers or potential financiers, and people introduced me, or it doesn't even have to be the Friars Club. It could be Soho House or Norwood, which is another private club on 14th Street in Manhattan, or the Core Club, which is super expensive. I think it's like 50 grand to apply for the application, and then 15,000 every year. So, with the Friars Club, it was expensive, not as expensive as the Core Club. But that was one way I found a lot of, potential financiers, and people that are willing dealing, that like entertainment, because it's an entertainment club. And then going to polo matches, to have a horse it's not like back in the day where everyone had a horse, and it was cheap, and having a car was expensive. It's the other way around now. If you have a horse, have a good horse, a horse that does polo, it's at least like $1 million or something, to feed it right, to maintain it, have a ranch, it could run around. So I go to Bethpage Polo. It's in Long Island. And they also do it in the Hamptons in Long Island too. And I go to these matches, and I'll just go. And I look at the calendar. Sometimes they have an event with Ferrari. All right, if they can afford a Ferrari, they have a horse, they can definitely cut a check. So I go in and, I just start talking to these people. I introduce them. And the thing is that most of these people, they started from something, or maybe they were born into a family with money, but they respect the hustle. So, straight to the point, make sure my I's are dotted, T's are crossed, who I am, why I'm there. And oh, that's so interesting. And, can add it to my collection or something. So did I successfully close any investors at polo matches? No, but I did build a Rolodex of people, that were open and interested. And the things that you need one yes. You don't need, a bunch of yeses. That's all you need. So, and then one door may open up to another door, I made a promise to myself to go to Art Basel every year. A casting director I work with was in with these guys from RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada. I went to some really boring event that they threw together at the Harvard Club in Manhattan, and it was very stuffy, Wall Street types, and I actually fell asleep a couple of times. It was like a 9-hour intense day talking about things that I felt they were talking hieroglyphics and reciprocals, and I just didn't understand. I understood some of it, but I couldn't weigh in. But at the end of the day, I became friendly with the guys from RBC. They kept talking about Art Basel. I'm like, what is this Art Basel thing? I don't even know what it is. And I felt a little embarrassed because everyone else knew, and there were a lot of people in the art world that were there, or collectors. So the RBC guy said, we're going to Art Basel at the end of the year. This was maybe in the late spring or summer. So I said, hey, I want to come. And they said, okay, great. We'd love to have you down there. You just got to make your way down there. So before Art Basel, I reconnected with the RBC guys, and I stayed in touch with them throughout, developed a relationship with one of the financial advisors over there. And I'd invited him to the Friars Club, and he loved it, and he geeked out. And I was looking for ways to help him as well. It's not a one-way street. It's give and take, give and take. It wasn't, hey, just get me to Art Basel. It was like, how can I help your business or clients? And he appreciated that because most people don't ask that, So I went down to Art Basel, and I went to the first night. They threw this event at the Versace Mansion in Miami, and it was just incredible. It was spectacular. I mean, it got so busy, they were turning away billionaires at the door. That's how crazy it was. And from that point on, I'm like, I need to be there. Not just I need to be there, I need to go down there with these guys. Because the guys that are coming with them are ball players or ex-ball players, clients that have, FU money, and really deep pockets. Hedge funds, venture capitalists, people with billion-dollar funds. And maybe they're not the right person to fund it, but they know someone that potentially can. So I made it a point to go to Art Basel every year, except for the year of the pandemic, because it didn't happen. And I've developed, like a investor-like list and people that are interested. And the reality of it is that because I've been to so many of these events, I used to have a database with all the investors listed, and, this is a hard lesson learned. One of my interns had shared it through his personal email, and I sort of loaded it to transferred it to my Google account, but I think his account deleted, and then I lost the whole spreadsheet. So I've told myself one of these days I'm going to build the investor spreadsheet again, but I just haven't had a chance to go through it. But the reality of it is that I have like a Rolodex of investors, and I've forgotten their mandates because they all have different things. Like, come to me if a project needs finishing money, or come to me when the project is earlier on, or come to me if it's like a huge star, or come to me if it's like $1 million movie or a $20 million movie. So going to all these events along the way, I've built like a Rolodex of people I can go to, and the reality of it, like I said, same thing with actors. You hire them, ask them about their friends. You get one investor, you get their friends. And I've done that multiple times when I do a project, like, do you have friends? And their friends come in and put money in, So that's how I found private equity, just going to maybe like a dentist convention. That used to be the way that people always said is finding investors, go to dentists and doctors, One of my dear friends, that's what he does. All of his investors are dentists and doctors. He goes to these doctor convention centers and he meets them. So I haven't quite done that. I will if I have to, but I've gone to other convention centers. I was at this big thing actually here in LA. It was like a cell phone convention, and it was the last day I was there. And I met this guy. He was a guy from the Middle East that was between Miami and the UAE. And I told him what I did, and he was like, wow, that's interesting. I've always wanted to get into the movie business and monetize my money. So then he approached me about investing. I'd gone down to Miami a couple of times to meet with him and his brother. And I had built this model. I'm not exercising it right now, but it's basically last in, first out, and LIFO, last in, first out. That's the term. And he was really interested in this model, and how it works is, if it's available, if the film is set up, if it's not pari passu, this investor could come in last. When the film gets sold, they get paid out first. Like if the film is almost finished with production or is finished with production, and he really liked that model. That's what he wanted to do. And the problem is that I did find some films that did have that, but he wanted a quick return. So I couldn't guarantee a quick return. And I just told him that when I have a project where the return can be quick, then I can bridge you in and bring you in. But yeah, it was just right place, right time, sharing that story with this individual. But now when I build out projects, I'm also thinking about, what production company or what, maybe distributor, I could maybe partner up with, finance it and release it. That's been, my strategy now going forward. And I'm not going to do that on every movie. But I was just in the UK, for example, and I met with this writer director, and he just did this movie that did really well. He's on a series now. And I met with two financiers while I was out in the UK that I met at Cannes. Well, one of them I met at Cannes. The other one I met virtually, but they go to Cannes all the time. And the first group I met with, they'd already known me. They liked my work. We want to find something together. They were familiar with the director I was going to meet with, and they want to work with him too. The second group I met with, they have three companies. One is a sales company that helps find financing. The other one finances against debt, meaning tax credits or any type of debt. And the third one is more of an equity, company. So I'd mentioned this filmmaker. They were very familiar with them, and they want to work with me too. So going into that meeting, I already like the director, like his work. Well, I don't know if I like him yet. I know I like what I've read so far. So when I met with him, we spent 2 or 3 hours and really bonded together. And I told him about the groups I met with and that they know him. And he's like, I know them too. And that's great. So now potentially we have financing to finance whatever we want to do together. And then he told me about the two groups that financed his last film. And he told me about an overall deal that he has. He told me to speak with his agent to clarify it. His agent had introduced us. So ultimately, we don't have a project yet, but I like him. He's Cuban American from Miami. I'm Haitian American, I lived in Miami for a little bit. We have that connection. We like each other, like each other's work. He watched my film the same day, and he's like, I love what you did. I don't know how you created it. I want to work with you. And I liked his work. So now we ultimately are going to find something to work on together. We figured out the financing, and we just have to figure out the distribution that works properly, with this. So that's one, example of me figuring out the financing before we even shoot,
Can I ask you something real quick? Sorry.
Yeah.
What does it mean to respect the hustle? You said with some of these individuals, these high net worth individuals, you'll meet them and they respect the hustle. What does that mean?
Most people overpromise and underdeliver, So I'll give you a perfect example of where it completely flipped. I went to Sonoma Film Festival. I want to say it was maybe 2017. First time I had the film that I did with Mercedes Rule there. And how Sonoma works is that if you have a feature, at least back then, I don't know how it is now, if you have a feature, they put you up in a hotel. If you have a short, then they pair you up with a housemate or something, like a family that wants to go to the festival, and this is their way of volunteering. And the homes in Sonoma are very nice. So I paired up with this family that was really amazing, and they stayed in touch with me, and I stayed in touch with them after. And what ended up happening is that the woman of the household had sent me a text one day about this guy named Gary Nelson. And I opened up this link, read about him, and he has an HR company that's been very successful. And he wanted to get involved in film. He wanted to finance movies. And he wanted to make the kind of films that I was making. And he had some other things that he wanted to add. And he really loved Sonoma and his, like his town and his city and humankind. So she didn't tell me to contact him. She was just sharing. Found it interesting. I took it as like, I need to call this guy. So I found his HR number, called, asked to speak to him, asked who I am. I said, I'm a filmmaker. I read this article. I want to work with Gary Nelson. Oh, okay. All right. Well, you're not going to get his number. I'll give you his email. You can email him. And if he wants to engage, he'll engage with you. So right after, I wrote a very detailed email sharing about my experience in Sonoma. I love Sonoma. And that I read about his mandate and how I'm making the type of films that he wants to finance, and that I'd love to work with him, And He emailed me back within 5 minutes, sent me his number. We jumped on a call, and I told him, I'm going to come out there one day and meet with you and shake your hand so you know I'm serious and I want to work with you. And he said, okay, all right, great. He probably hears it all the time. So what had happened was that I think I told you after Sundance, I go to LA for about a month. And that's what happened the following year. I went to LA, and the Bay is only a 45-minute plane ride, from LA, from LAX. So I booked a one-way up there. I called Gary. I said, Gary, guess what? I'm coming to Sonoma to meet you. And he was like, what? I'm like, yeah. So I took a Sprinter bus, and this stupid Mark Twain quote I kept hearing, because this was it in the summer? No, it wasn't in the summer. That happened another time when I went to see Gary. But Mark Twain has this thing where he says, the coldest winter I ever had was a summer in San Francisco. And I'd gone in a t-shirt and I was like freezing cold. I didn't know that it was cold in San Francisco that time of the year. So anyway, I jumped on a Sprinter bus. It takes about an hour to get into Sonoma County. I got into Sonoma County, and then I jumped in a 45-minute Uber and drove to Gary. Met him. How'd you get here? You have no car. Oh, I took Uber. And then he told me, by the way, I am an investor in Lyft. If you don't mind, take Lyft. So now usually I take Lyft if I'm in the US. If I'm outside of the country, Lyft doesn't exist, I take an Uber. And then I basically did exactly what I told Gary I was gonna do. He saw that I took a plane, I took a bus, took an Uber just to sit down with him. I didn't ask for anything. And he bought me breakfast. It was very nice of him. And we had a really good meeting. We spent like almost 2 hours together, and it went from me pitching him to him telling me about the projects that he's wanting to make and do I want to be a part of it. And there was a project that he wanted to tell, and I got on it right away. It was about a prolific singer from the 70s or 80s. And I was saying, like, Gary, we need to move on it quick. Gary doesn't move as fast as I do, but what ended up happening was that there was an announcement in the trades that the story was snatched up, and it didn't happen. So because of that. But so meeting the hustle is, I'm not saying that this is the only way to do it. I mean, this is probably, I feel like I over-delivered and under-promised. That's what I did, in terms of that, like, granted, I said that's what I would do, but most people aren't going to do that, like, if it's someone that's serious, NFO, next flight out. I will go anywhere in the world, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, if I have to learn a couple of words, whatever I need to do, I will go there. It has to be someone very serious and multiple conversations. I'm not going to just go because it's a big investment in time and money, but I want people to treat me very serious and know that I'm no joke, and I expect them to cut a check. If I'm going to do all of that, if it fits within what they would, their mandate or whatever, how they invest, I'll make sure that I tee it up to make sure that everything is in top T shape. And that's what I mean, like, meet the hustle, because most people aren't going to do that. It's exceptional or rare. So they know that I am going to take care of their asset. I'm not going to take their money and run around the world and just live my life. I'm going to take their money and do my best to get them a return, at least break even, and communicate with them and let them know. And if I mess up, let them know too, because there's no guarantees in this business. There's acts of nature that can affect things.
What would make a doctor, dentist, lawyer, someone who's a CPA invest in an independent film?
A lot of times it's vanity, like, oh, cool, my name is on this project, like, I'm an executive producer, most of the time when they're doing that, there's this rumor, and it's kind of true, is that even though these guys are brilliant, they're not good with their money. They put their money into stupid things. So a lot of times, at least a doctor, a lawyer would be a little bit smarter, but doctors and dentists specifically, they do it all the time. They buy things that they don't need, so that's why they're a great, target in terms of that, and why they've invested so many times. Lawyers, More or less, maybe they'll bring in a client or maybe they'll put in, but same kind of deal. Like I remember being at Sundance and I went to this party and I don't think anything happens by accident, but I ended up at this party, didn't know much about it. And the party or event, most of the people there were all investors, had no idea. I just went. And the young lady I spoke with majority of the time, she was a lawyer that invests in film, and she represents 50 people that invest. So, again, they have links to it, or, a lot of times maybe they want to help change the world, or they want to do some type of impact. Yeah.
Right. Or it's just exciting to go to a screening, go to a festival. Maybe their work is so, cut and dry, or something that's not as I know it seems sexy and fun to be
Yeah.
part of film. It's a lot
And
of hard
sometimes
work.
what they'll do is that they'll bring their client to set. Oh, like, look, I invest in movies. This is what I do. It's, it's vanity. Like, oh, wow, So sometimes it's that, So it's a multiple bit of things.
What does it mean to give a voice to the voiceless?
Well, perfect example is our film Cicada. It's based off a true story. Matt shared an intimate part of his life and the abuse that he went through. And it was very hard for him to share that. And I remember when we were doing test screenings of our film that we'd have people that we don't know come to the screenings to give feedback, because we don't want people to say what we want to hear. We want constructive criticism. And this one guy came at the end, came up to Matt specifically and said, "This was me. I've never had, I've never been able to tell anyone and what I've went through, and thank you so much for making this. Like, you've given a voice, and that was the first time we had heard it. And we've traveled all over Europe recently with the film and all over the country with the film. It's played at various festivals and it was in theaters. And there were so many people, so many men that have come up and shared with the team, Matt, myself, Kieran, that we've given them a voice, so.
Do a lot of them say they were family members that did this, or a friend of the family?
I think it's a combination of both, like they didn't all go into like great detail about it, but they just wanted to acknowledge that they had gone through it, they understand it, and how our project was therapeutic. So yeah, that was more or less how.
And Cicada is also about a relationship too. It's not all about abuse. It's about two men that find love.
Yeah, it's about an interracial relationship between these two guys that meet, over a summer. And it deals with, bisexuality, which is not touched upon in film a lot. And the interracial relationship, the dynamics of that. And also deals with trauma, because there's a lot of trauma around both characters.
And it's at the Spirit Awards, correct?
Yes, it's nominated for Best First Screenplay.
Very cool. Did you think that it would have a chance, or did people say, "Oh, this is not going to sell. This is not going to be something people will be interested in. It might scare people"?
In terms of
Anything, whether it's the bisexuality, the abuse, interracial.
in terms of what's selling the movie?
Yeah,
or-
would it be too much of a hard sell, or would people welcome it with open arms because finally people were telling stories that it seemed like had been pushed to the side?
Along the way, I feel like we made so many errors on that project. We didn't know what to expect. I knew it was a good script, and it changed because of certain things that had happened to Sheldon in real life, which molded into the script. So what we went in with initially wasn't what we thought we would end with. And I think that we ultimately did win the Kenneth Raining Grant, and we got funding from SF Film and Kenneth Raining Grant. And one of the reasons I think that they got behind us was our POV, our point of view, and that we were telling a very, challenging story, and we needed the support. And after we, won it, they basically got TFI, Tribeca Film Institute, involved, and we were part of a special segment at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2019. And at that point, we didn't know where we were going to land, but we had meetings with everybody under the sun, from A24 to you name it, that were interested in one. So we knew we had something special. And that's where we met our sales rep, Jeffrey Winter at Film Collaborative, who ultimately really helped the entire process, because he understands the queer space very well. He's been very successful in the queer space. And at the time when we shot the film, my producing partner, Jeremy, was 21. He had just graduated NYU. Everyone was in their 20s. I was 34, so I was the grandfather of the whole group. We were a very young team, and we made a lot of errors and mistakes. And Jeffrey gave us guidance. He gave us confidence in terms of the project. He was like a godfather to Matt. And he made a lot of introductions and really supported the film. And and he gave us the pros and cons in terms of all of the distributors that we're speaking with. And that really helped the project. So we knew we were going to land somewhere. We didn't know where we were going to land. And the great thing is that we had options of who we wanted to go with in the US and many of the other countries that we ended up getting a deal in. So yeah, it kind of shaped throughout the process.
And were there certain other countries that were very open to the film and then others that refused to have it?
Well, we haven't sold all the territories yet, so I think that there's maybe still opportunities to do that. I don't think it'll sell in Russia, because they're anti-queer. So anywhere that's anti-queer probably is not going to work. And it was interesting being in Poland because their government, the country's fascist, their government is anti-queer. If you want to call it a blue dot, Warsaw and Poznan are the two places that are. And it was, quite a feat to be able to get the film there. And there was some, concerns about going there. The team was nervous about going there and like, what if something can happen? And, but our Polish distributor took really good care of us. And, we were with someone the entire time, and they picked us up and kind of had security detail, with that. And when I spoke to the people of Poznan, Poznan is the biggest queer city in Poland. They were just thrilled to have us. And I asked, how is it to live out there? What is it like? And, they consider themselves freedom fighters, and standing up for their rights. And this is the way it is. They're not going to back down. Warsaw is a much bigger city. I want to say that they're just a lot more open, there, with that in consideration. But we were well received in both cities. And I want to say with all the other cities that we've played in so far, that's been the case. They were just happy that we're able to come and engage, do intros, and do detailed Q&As, with the audience. And the film is coming out in France, I think this month or next month. We're not going to make that leg. The French didn't necessarily play nice with all the other distributors, because when we went out there, it was a coordination between our UK distributor, our Polish distributor, and German distributor. So France said, we're going to release when we want to, when we feel like it. We don't need to coordinate with them, So we'll be coming out, and I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit, in France and throughout France.
So no other countries aside from those? Just it sounds like.
I believe Switzerland as well, because when we showed Germany, certain parts of Switzerland are German speaking, I believe, and there were talks about Portugal. But those are all the locations for right now.
Why is it your mission to make these stories?
My mission to tell these stories is very important because now I'm going to get spiritual with you. I consider myself a light worker, and what a light worker is someone in whatever industry or business uses their skills or their talents to make the world a better place and be kind and help mankind. And I believe when God gives you, or the Creator gives you certain tools, it's your responsibility to share that with the world. So I enjoy helping people. And there was a class that the New York Times had talked about at Harvard that everyone was looking to get into, and it was a class on happiness. The class had sold out. This was like a couple of years ago. And ultimately, when they broke down the class, it was that people are happy when they help other people. That's really what it is. So I enjoy helping other people. I help all walks of life, doesn't matter religion, creed, whatever. And I know that if it was me or if it was my family member and I needed the help, because there's times where I do need help, and it's not always necessarily, what I'm giving, I'm asking for back. But there's times that I may struggle with something, or as a diabetic, or there was this one time where I legit lost my wallet in Manhattan and I had no way to get around or get into anything. And, like this person at Chase was very kind to let me take some of my money out so I can get home. But, I've had times where I've lost, unfortunately, it happened a few times where I've lost my wallet. And it's not that I don't have money, it's just I didn't have money on me to be able to get to where I need to go, do what I need to do. And everyone needs help with something. So I believe that it's my responsibility to share that with the world, whether it's speaking engagements, doing an HBCU tour, producing these films around these issues, doing social impact, trying to find someone that was falsely incarcerated and trying to help rehabilitate them. Because I'm aware, the fact that I'm aware. If I wasn't aware, it's different. But I'm aware and I can do something. Why not? It's not hurting me. It's only helping others, and it's helping me. And it's spiritual law, the more you give, the more you get. I'm not looking to get more, but it's just how the universe works, So I believe in that. So I give a lot and I get a lot.
When did you realize you were a light worker?
I want to say it was around that same time in 2016 when I was in Istanbul. I started meeting a lot more light workers and energy healers and learning more about this world. I had this woman that was very dear to me named Arlie, and she was a big inspiration. I learned a lot, through her, and met a lot of her friends and colleagues that were that shaped my character and point of view on these things. So I want to say that the tipping point was probably around 2016.
Have you ever tried to help someone that didn't want help?
All the time, but one of the things that I've learned is that I have to respect that, because I can't, because if I force it on them, it's going to backfire, and I may take their karma, at the same time. So they have to ask for it, they have to ask for the help and want the help, because they're not going to value it at the same time. So in the beginning, or not in the beginning, before, I was really I found my flow, I'd overstep. I'd offer advice when people would ask me advice. I'd help people when they didn't ask for help, and it would backfire on me, because maybe I'd get frustrated and, wait, we didn't ask you to do this. You didn't have to do it. I didn't want you to do this, so there's no appreciation. So, and I just learned it wasn't on me. Like, it wasn't my place to tell someone what they should do. If they come to me and ask, it's a different thing if they ask for help. But it was a hard lesson to learn. And even now, with like family and friends, people that I really care and love, sometimes I want to do stuff for them, but it's not my place. And I have to, respect their boundary and respect that spiritual law, that boundary.